All right, so I'm thinking a lot of us have seen the commercial that says milk builds stronger bones because it's mostly calcium. Your bones store a lot of calcium. We know that. A lot of people know that before they even take this class. My kids know that. But the primary job of calcium in your body isn't to build bones. That's actually not why we have to have calcium. The bones are just storage. They're just there to make sure you have enough. And if your amount of calcium in your blood starts to go down, bone just starts tossing it out, kind of picture like a bucket brigade, like, oh, hand it over, somebody else needs it. The primary job of calcium in your blood is actually going to be for things like allowing electrical signals to happen or muscle contraction. So without that calcium to be readily available out in the fluids, out in the blood, you die. So bone, really cool as far as its function of making sure we're alive by having enough calcium ready. And we can pull out of that storage if we need to. And if we have access, go store it in the bone. And so we're going to talk about that negative feedback loop, that control mechanism that tells us how and when to store up versus take out of that bone. And so with anything we're dealing with homeostasis, we're going to do a negative feedback loop. Remember, homeostasis is the happy range. I always like to draw it as a box that you're trying to stay within. And so we have this normal range of calcium floating around in blood that we always want to have. And as long as we're in the box, we're not worried about it. Life just continues on. But if there is a change, we are going to notice, because change is what will kill us. So we have to make sure we're staying in this box. There will always be receptors to notify us of that change. Now, receptors can't fix anything. Their job is just to relay information to a control center. Now, the control center is going to interpret information and send out commands. So it's going to be a communication function here. So we're going to that was weird to say. So we're either going to be a brain feature, a central nervous system feature, or we're going to be an endocrine structure, right? Because nervous system and endocrine, those are systems for communication. Now, in the case of calcium homeostasis, it's going to be endocrine based because we want widespread across the body. We can pull from all of the bones at once, not just one particular target. Because remember, with nervous system, you're sending it via a wire, a neuron, specifically the axon of a neuron, to a specific target saying, hey, I need you to do this. But with hormones, what you're doing is you're putting the signal, this chemical message, out into the blood, and then it can be distributed throughout your whole body and have multiple places respond at the same time. So that control center here is going to be endocrine. And we're going to talk to effectors. And those effectors are going to cause a solution that is the opposite of your change. Now, if you are looking at calcium homeostasis, so let's make this specific here. So calcium homeostasis, and we're specifically talking blood. There are really three plants. I keep focusing on the bone because that's the chapter we're in, so we'll talk about that one first. So one of the effectors is bone, the storage unit. But that's not the only way we can get calcium. We can also get calcium from our diet, hence the start of this video, me saying, hey, we've seen the commercial, milk builds stronger bone. Did I say that weird? Milk builds stronger bones because you can get fresh calcium from your diet. And so to get it in, we're going to break it down into its small parts and then absorb it at the intestines. So the majority of absorption, when you're bringing stuff into your body for the very first time, that happens in your small intestines. So that would be another place. The third thing, so again, I guess if you're thinking of an analogy of something like, let's do flour and you're going to bake a cake. You have some options. You could take extra flour if you're noticing like, oh, I'm running low. You can take it out of your storage unit, right? You can go to your pantry and pull out some extra flour. You could go to the store and get fresh. That would be the intestines. Or you could just make sure you don't throw away whatever you have. So if you have some flour spill out of the bag when you put it on the counter, you're going to scrape it off that counter and not throw it into your trash. And that's going to happen at the kidneys. So the kidney, the job of the kidney is to basically clean out our blood. They filter it. And so you give the kidney a sample of your blood and then it will adjust based on homeostasis for a variety of things. Like, oh, we're a little dehydrated. We need to keep extra water, for example. Or, oh, we're a little low on calcium. Let's make sure we keep that. And so there's a few things that the kidney will do, and we'll come back to that. But right here, what we just drew up, this is a typical negative feedback loop. Anytime you're working with the physiology of an organ system and you're trying to balance something, just start with this blueprint and then just fill in the pieces. And so let's, for the first round through, talk about what if calcium is just too low. And then we'll talk about it, what if it's too high. So if calcium is too low, so let's say our change is a decrease in blood calcium. Receptors will notice. They're specifically chemoreceptors because it's a chemical. They're going to talk to a control center. Remember, I said this is going to be an endocrine structure. The control center, specifically, if your blood levels are too low, it's going to be the parathyroid gland. Parathyroid gland is going to release a hormone, and guess what the name of that's going to be if it's coming from the parathyroid gland? Parathyroid hormone. So parathyroid hormone is going to talk to bone, intestines, and kidney. Remember, if the problem is that blood is going to not have enough calcium, the solution is to increase blood calcium levels. Now, how can we do that from these three things? Well, we can pull it out of bone. Well, how do we get calcium out of bone? Well, you have to chew it up. So you're going to stimulate osteoclasts. So stimulate the chewers. When they chew down the bone, it frees the calcium. The intestines, what you're going to do is you're going to increase absorption of calcium. So remember, absorption first time it's in your body. So you're sending a signal to the intestines, hey, if you see any of that, grab it. We're going to want some. The kidneys, it's filtering. So it's taking stuff from your blood, stuff that's already in your body, and it's going to put it on this conveyor belt that's going to work its way towards your bladder. And your job here is to say, whoa, 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 pull that off that conveyor belt, bring it back in. So you're bringing it back into the body. And so when you're doing that, we call that reabsorption. So absorption, first time it was in your body. Here we want to increase what we call reabsorption. There's also another feature here. The kidneys do work as an endocrine gland as well. So remember I talked about calcium levels. If they're too low, you could die. It's kind of a big deal. So we'll use more than just one hormone to say, hey, we really need this. So the kidneys will also make, so we're going to increase the production of a hormone called calcitriol. That should sound familiar to you from our talk on integument. Remember, integument made vitamin D3, and that vitamin D3 went to the liver to turn into calcidiol, and then went to the kidneys to turn into calcitriol. That calcitriol talks to the intestines and say, hey, bring in calcium. So this is another signal to come over here to say, no, that's really a big deal. Make sure you grab all that you can find. And so you get two signals here to those intestines saying, well, absorb whatever calcium you can find. So all of these things will increase the amount of calcium in our blood, and eventually we get back into our little box and it will shut the system off. Remember, that's how negative feedback works, is you're just trying to get back within your normal range. Once you do, you're going to send a signal back out saying, we're good, and everything kind of shuts back down. Now, what if the problem is the opposite? What if instead of a decreased blood calcium, you have an increase? Well, the nice thing is with any of the negative feedback loops, once you get one direction down, the other ones just do the opposite. So instead of a decrease, we're going to do increase in blood calcium. And instead of the parathyroid gland, we're going to use the thyroid gland. Now, instead of parathyroid hormone, we're going to use a different one. If it's coming from thyroid gland, I know you want to say thyroid hormone. Unfortunately, they already use that name for a different hormone out of the thyroid gland. It has to do with metabolism. Save that for later. So here, the hormone that we're going to release from the thyroid gland is going to be called calcitonin. Now, calcitonin, the trick I use on this is calcitonin, tone it down. So cal, I hear calcium, tonin, tone it down. You have too much, tone it down, go sit in the bone, think about what you're doing. So here we're just going to do the opposite of everything. Instead of stimulating osteoclasts, you're going to inhibit them. Now, you don't need to stimulate osteoblasts, the builders. They're always working at their base rate in the background. Your intestines, you don't need to increase absorption. You're actually going to decrease absorption of calcium. Your kidneys, you're going to decrease reabsorption of calcium and decrease the production of calcitriol. That will overall result in a decrease in blood calcium levels, getting you back into homeostasis. So I do recommend trying that from scratch, this increase in blood calcium without any notes, just to see if you can do it with the flip version that I just quickly showed. All right, everyone, thanks for watching.